Mark Consuelos revealed that he and Kelly Ripa briefly split just 1 week before their wedding day. The 54-year-old opened up about his marriage during an appearance on the Skinny Confidential podcast. "We eloped," he said. "It's pretty famously eloped, and we told no one for a month. But if you would have asked me a week before I got married and said, 'When do you think you're going to get married?' I would be like, I don't know, maybe never, or 10 years or 15 years from now." And I was 25 years old. The live host explained that, due to his immaturity at the time, he ended their relationship, a decision he instantly regretted. It's kind of a funny story, as we broke up the week before. I broke up with her because I was dumb, and it was the most agonizing week of my life, and I just knew I never wanted to feel like that. "I've never felt like that in my life," he admitted. "What did she do to you during that week?" asked Lauren Bostic. "She didn't return any of my calls," replied Mark. The star went on to recall how the two were brought back together by circumstance, having to reunite on set while working on the same soap opera. "And then we were meant to do a bit of PR together. We were on a soap, and ironically, we were both going to be presenting a winner. It was Queen for the day, and we both tried to get out of it," he said. Mark continued, "We get there that day, and you asked me, what did she do? She looked amazing. And I was like, oh man, she looks so good. Boy, did I screw up. And so we do the segment. We barely speak to each other. I'm trying to speak to her. We both smoked cigarettes back then. And so she went out for a smoke break. I said, 'Do you mind if I come out with you?' She said, 'Yeah, if you want.' And so that happened." The TV host then shared how he won Kelly back with an unexpected grand gesture, one that proved his commitment once and for all. "And then after the segment was done, she lived on the west side. I followed her and begged her to take a walk with me through Central Park," he recalled. "And she really didn't want to, but I was convincing, and so she did. And then we ended up back at my place. I lived downtown, and I asked her to marry me." Visibly stunned, host Michael Bostic asked, "Like after the walk?" "That same day." "Yeah, and she said, 'Ask me when you're serious.' And I said, 'I am dead serious. We have a day off work tomorrow. Let's fly to Vegas and get married," added Mark. There are stories of love that feel inevitable only in retrospect. Tidy tales the movies would write with the ease of knowing the ending. Then there are the scrappier, scarred stories, the ones where a single stupid decision, a few unanswered calls, and 7 hammered-out days of panic nearly derail everything. Mark Consuelo's recent recollection of the week he and Kelly Ripa almost didn't get married is one of those latter stories, messy, human, and strangely cinematic. In a candid conversation on the Skinny Confidential podcast, the 54-year-old actor peeled back the curtain on a moment that could have become a permanent regret. He told host Lauren Bostic that he and Kelly, then both young, both tethered to ambition, both somehow not quite ready for the gravity of what they felt, broke up the week before their planned wedding. "I broke up with her because I was dumb," Mark said plainly, and the humility in that sentence is what makes the rest of the tale resonate. He called that week the most agonizing week of my life, and when you hear the sequence of events, you understand why. At 25, Mark said, he was not the man he would become. If you would have asked me a week before I got married and said, "When do you think you're going to get married?" I would be like, I don't know, maybe never, or 10 years or 15 years from now, he remembered. Immaturity, fear, or perhaps the wild impulsiveness of youth, whatever the precise mixture, led him to end the relationship. The wrenching aftermath was immediate and absolute. "She didn't return any of my calls," he told Bostic, and you can picture the crushing silence on the other end of the phone. For a week, Mark walked through an emotional landscape that many fear, the knowledge that a single rash act could append the person you love. He described feeling an intensity he'd never experienced before, and a certainty that he never wanted to feel that way again. It's possible to imagine him replaying every line, every decision, until the smallness of whatever had driven him to break up eclipsed his fear. That kind of clarity, born from panic, can change a person fast, and sometimes it drives them back to the very thing they tried to leave. Chance, or the peculiarly circular ways of show business, did its part. Both were working on the same soap opera, and fate dropped them into the same publicity moment, presenting Queen for the day. Both tried to wriggle out of it. Both, one assumes, tried to avoid the awkwardness. But show business obligations have a funny way of forcing proximity, and the two wound up on set together. What followed is the kind of small human scene that, in a novel, will be given a scene of its own. They barely spoke during the segment. They both tried to keep it professional. Both smoked cigarettes at the time. Kelly stepped outside for a smoke break, and Mark asked if he could join her. "Yeah, if you want," she said, and that tiny allowance, that almost involuntary permission, opened the door. It's not a grand cinematic moment. There were no sweeping orchestral cues, no stylized montage, just two people, awkward and alive, standing outside under the same indifferent sky. Mark told the podcast they were trying to speak to one another, and he noticed how good she looked. There's a particular kind of regret that comes when you realize in real time that you made a mistake. Mark's description of seeing Kelly and thinking, "Boy, did I screw up," is the moment of reorientation. He followed her home, begged her for a walk through Central Park, convinced her to take the walk even though she didn't want to, and eventually found himself back at his apartment downtown. The rest, surprising in its swiftness and audacity, happened fast. After that walk, Mark asked Kelly to marry him. "Ask me when you're serious," she told him, and his answer was immediate. "I'm dead serious. We have a day off work tomorrow. Let's fly to Vegas and get married." They did just that, eloped, told nobody for a month, and began the life that would last decades. It's the sort of youthful impulsiveness that could have read like a red flag, marrying on a whim after a breakup that happened days before. But the story's honesty is in the way Mark frames it, not as a reckless, irresponsible gamble, but as an act of contrition and commitment. The proposal on the heels of a humiliating, regret-filled week becomes, in his telling, the antidote, an attempt to make a permanent correction to a temporary mistake. There's a theatrical quality to the recounting, but beneath it is a quieter truth about how people change. Mark uses blunt language about being dumb and immature at 25, and that admission is part of the story's power. To acknowledge a real mistake, to look back and call it plainly what it was, is an act both risky and restorative. It disarms glamour and replaces it with real feeling. The sight of someone you've hurt looking beautiful and indignant and infuriating in the best possible way. The self-knowledge that you cannot let that go. The anecdote also contains small, vivid details that make it stick. The smoke breaks, the soap opera PR duties, the Central Park walk. These aren't just props. They function as connective tissue between the public images of two young actors and the private, fragile human exchange that finally stitched them back together. Those details lend a specific texture to the story. We can see the set lights, smell the cigarette smoke, feel the cold of a New York evening as two people decide, in the span of a few hours, to step onto a different track. There's another strand running through the story that deserves emphasis: the paradox of elopement. Eloping is traditionally conceived as a private, romantic rebellion against the spectacle of a big wedding. Mark says plainly, "We eloped." It's pretty famously eloped, and we told no one for a month. The secrecy was part of the intimacy, a way to reclaim agency after a week of self-sabotage. To elope is to declare, in a small but firm way, that the relationship is not theater. It's something real that can survive outside cameras and public opinion. It's both a promise and an exhale. The whole narrative also reads like a miniature lesson in what it takes to sustain a relationship beyond the early, easy days. You could imagine that at 25, with careers just beginning and identities still forming, fear about being tethered might feel suffocating. Mark's confession shows that he panicked and tried to run. But then he had to live with the consequences of that panic, and living with him changed him. In his telling, the agony of the week, the calls unreturned, the strangeness of being near Kelly and being forbidden to comfort her, was more instructive than any long courtship could be. It taught him very quickly where his center of gravity lay. When Mark recalls following Kelly home and begging for a walk, there is a humility in the pursuit, an image of a man who finally understands the stakes. And when he says he asked her to marry me, the bluntness of the language makes the story feel less like a celebrity anecdote and more like a human plea. "I am dead serious" is an endearingly clumsy, forthright line, the kind of thing someone says when they mean to convert panic into action. It's both romantic and awkward, which probably explains a good deal of why the story resonates. It's not stylized, it's immediate,